torches flicker against the stone walls of the great hall. 100 voices chant her name, "Long live the Queen." She sits upon her throne, her back straight, her smile fixed, her hands trembling just enough to make the rubies on her fingers tremble too. Upon her head rests a crown of golden iron, forged to resemble a halo. Its edges catch the light beautifully. No one can see the small, glistening thorns hidden beneath the jewels. The longer she sits, the heavier it becomes. Sweat trickles down her scalp, and somewhere beneath the weight, she feels the first sting. Blood slips between strands of hair and runs down her neck like a single red thread. Still she smiles. A courtier's cheer. Musicians play. The Archbishop bows and calls her the Blessed One. She nods, though the metal bites deeper. They will never know that with every cheer, the crown sinks further into her flesh, that beneath the silk and the ceremony, their queen is being unmade. It is said the crown's creator called it the grace of God, but grace in this kingdom was sharpened to a point. And on that night, faith began to feed. In the heart of the old continent stood a kingdom that worshipped power disguised as piety. Its rulers claimed their crowns were gifts from heaven, each jewel a tear shed by the angels who blessed their reign. To question that was blasphemy. To disobey it was death. The court called itself the Empire of Grace. But grace here was measured not in kindness, but in endurance, the ability to suffer beautifully and never complain. Every ritual, every law, every symbol reminded the people that pain was divine and silence was proof of faith. The queen who would wear the crown of thorns was not born to it. She came from across the sea, a foreign princess offered as tribute to end a war her people could no longer win. Her name was Isolde of Avermont, known for her calm gaze and intellect that unsettled kings. The marriage was meant to unite two nations under the banner of peace, but peace in this court was another word for obedience. From the moment she arrived, the nobles whispered, she was too pale, too proud, too foreign. They said her accent sounded like a spell, her poise like defiance. The king adored her at first, drawn to her quiet composure, her refusal to flatter. But adoration curdles quickly in men who fear being understood. The court's clergy soon found use for her difference. The archbishop, an old man who believed women's virtue was proven only through suffering, declared that the queen must undergo a rite of devotion. It was an ancient ceremony said to bind her to the light of the crown. Every queen before her had endured a symbolic gesture, a crown placed upon her head for one night, then lifted at dawn. But this time, something changed. The archbishop insisted on forging a new crown, a sacred relic that would unite heaven and earth through sacrifice. The king approved it. He was told the design came from divine inspiration, though the blacksmith later confessed he had been ordered to embed small iron thorns beneath the gold. They told me, he wrote, each point shall pierce pride and reveal grace. It took months to craft. The base was gold, but inside ran a frame of tempered iron shaped like vines, dozens of tiny spikes twisted inward, invisible from afar but sharp enough to break skin. Between them lay jewels polished to perfection, emeralds, sapphires, and a single ruby in the center, said to symbolize the queen's heart. When the crown was completed, the archbishop held it up before the court. It shimmered under the torchlight like liquid sunlight. The nobles knelt. The king smiled. None of them saw the blood that already stained the craftsman's hands. On the day of the ceremony, Isolde stood barefoot before the altar. The choir sang in Latin, their voices echoing through the stone hall like morning bells. She was dressed in silver silk, her hair unbound, her expression still. The archbishop raised the crown, his lips trembling as he spoke. Let her wear the weight of heaven." When the iron touched her scalp, she flinched, but only once. The congregation gasped at her composure. No one saw the crimson bead that welled beneath the jewels. Afterward, the archbishop declared it a miracle. The queen had accepted divine grace without pain. But behind her veil, Isolde felt the metal pulse against her skull, each thorn embedding a little deeper as she breathed. In the following days, she was required to wear the crown during every service, every royal procession, every appearance before the court. She obeyed without a word. Servants who dressed her began to notice faint stains on the pillowcases, strands of hair stuck together with dried blood. They whispered that she was being punished for sins the king could not admit. Weeks turned into months. The spikes beneath the crown began to rust with sweat and heat, fusing with her skin. Physicians suggested removing it, but the archbishop refused. To lift the grace of God, he warned, is to invite his wrath. The queen stopped sleeping. The pain never left. Some nights, when the halls were silent, servants claimed they could hear faint tapping from her chambers, the sound of metal shifting against bone. Still, she never spoke of it. She attended feasts, smiled at children, kissed her husband's hand. The nobles began calling her the sainted queen, a living emblem of purity. Her suffering became fashion. Young women began wearing imitation crowns of gold thread at ceremonies, believing it made them holy. The archbishop wrote sermons about her endurance. The king commissioned portraits, showing her radiant beneath the crown, eyes raised toward heaven. None of them noticed how the crown sat lower each month, pressing further into her skull. The queen had become everything the empire worshipped: obedient, silent, beautiful. But divinity carved from flesh always demands more. The queen's pain was no longer hidden. It became spectacle proof of faith, proof of power. And when pain becomes performance, the ritual never truly ends. The day of her final ceremony arrived like a storm disguised as prayer. Bells rang from every tower, their echo trembling through the city like a warning no one could hear. The occasion was meant to celebrate 10 years of peace, 10 years of a reign sanctified by the Queen's divine endurance. But behind the celebration, the palace reeked of metal and incense. The Queen could no longer tell whether the scent came from the torches or from her own blood. The crown had become a part of her. The spikes, once hidden, had burrowed so deeply that her hair had grown around them in fine black curls, matted with dried wounds. Servants, when brushing her hair, avoided the crown entirely. They whispered that the metal moved on its own, that it tightened when she prayed. No one dared confirm the truth. The skin beneath the crown was no longer healing. Every touch sent lightning through her skull. Every heartbeat throbbed against the metal rim. Sometimes she felt the pulse, not in her veins, but in the crown itself, as if the thing had learned to live with her, to drink from her blood. She could feel it breathe. That morning, as she sat before her mirror, a physician entered quietly, summoned under secrecy by her handmaid. He bowed, trembling. "Majesty," he whispered, "if the crown is not removed soon, it will reach the bone." She met his eyes in the mirror. "Then let it find what it seeks." Her voice was soft, neither defiant nor broken, only resolved. She dismissed him before he could argue. By dusk, the hall was ready. Banners of crimson and gold hung from the pillars. The nobles gathered in jewels and lace, their laughter bouncing off the marble like hollow music. The archbishop approached her with the same solemnity he had shown 10 years earlier. The king, older and heavier, watched in silence from his throne, eyes avoiding hers. The queen's gown shimmered like dawn itself, woven with threads of silver and light. Her crown gleamed more brightly than ever, each ruby catching the firelight and scattering it across the room like shards of sun. The crowd gasped as she entered. She looked like a vision. Only the faint red halo around the base of her crown betrayed the truth. The ceremony began. The choir sang hymns of devotion, voices layered like waves breaking over stone. The archbishop recited prayers of gratitude for the queen's purity and sacrifice. Every word echoed through the air like a chain tightening. As the hymns rose, she felt the metal shift, the edges pressing deeper. She swayed slightly, hiding the tremor with practiced grace. But the pain had changed. It no longer stung, it pulsed, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat between her skull and the iron. The crown had found its rhythm, matching her pulse perfectly. Each beat pressed the thorns a fraction deeper, grinding through flesh, through sinew, until the warmth began to spread behind her eyes. Still, she smiled. When the archbishop raised the relic of the cross above her, calling her the vessel of divine grace, she tilted her head upward in reverence. The motion drove the front spike against her temple. A thread of crimson rolled down her cheek. The crowd gasped softly, awed by what they thought was a tear of ecstasy. Her vision blurred, the candles melting into rivers of gold. Her body swayed again. Somewhere in the haze, she heard a voice whisper her name, not from the crowd, not from the king, but from above her, within the crown itself. It spoke like the rustle of leaves, like iron grinding on stone. "You are mine now. You and I shall never part." Her knees trembled. The archbishop thought she was overcome by holiness and signaled the choir to sing louder. The sound became unbearable. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling, gloved in white silk, now dotted with small, dark stains. She felt her strength slipping away, the world narrowing to the sound of her own breath rasping beneath the weight. She wanted to remove it, to claw the metal from her head, but her fingers only grazed the jewels, slick with her own blood. No one moved to help her. To touch the crown was sacrilege. Her last act was to stand. The hall fell silent as she rose slowly from the throne, one hand gripping the armrest for balance. Her smile widened, eerie in its calm. She looked out across the crowd at the nobles, the priests, the courtiers, and said in a voice clear enough to echo through every corridor, "You wished for grace. Here it is." Then she fell. The crown struck the marble first. The sound rang out like a bell. When the courtiers rushed forward, they found her eyes still open, staring upward as if she were still listening. The crown did not slide from her head, it was fused. The spikes had pierced her skull completely, anchoring it in bone. When they tried to lift it, blood welled in fresh streams, and the archbishop commanded them to stop. "She must not be touched," he said. "She has become holy." The crowd fell to their knees. They wept, prayed, sang. They called her death a miracle. The king said nothing. He simply turned away. The crown remained, glistening with blood and jewels, its spikes hidden once more by her dark hair. It was never removed. When she was buried, the crown went with her. The tomb was sealed beneath the cathedral floor, and the archbishop declared that her spirit would guard the kingdom forever. But those who carried her coffin whispered that when they lowered it into the crypt, they heard metal creak softly, like a hinge tightening. Centuries passed, and the queen's name faded into legend, but her crown remained. The people who had once watched her bleed now worshipped her memory. They called her Saint Isolde of Grace, the queen who proved that faith could conquer flesh. Her tomb became a shrine. Pilgrims traveled for miles to kneel before the stone that sealed her away, whispering prayers for endurance, for patience, for obedience. Above her tomb, the church built an altar of white marble veined with red. They said the streaks appeared naturally, that even the stone remembered her blood. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, the priests would lower torches into the crypt and swear they saw a faint shimmer beneath the dust, as though the crown still glowed with divine light. No one spoke of what was buried inside her skull. Over time, the crown's story changed. It was no longer an instrument of cruelty, but a miracle of faith. The archbishop's successors rewrote the chronicles, erasing the words iron and thorn. They called it the halo of purity, forged by angels to test the worthiness of queens. Pain became holiness. Submission became worship. And the women of the court believed it. Each new queen demanded to see the relic before her coronation, kneeling in reverence as the priests unveiled the golden crown, now blackened by centuries. They were told that whoever wore it would inherit divine grace, that the blood once shed upon it still sanctified the monarchy. One queen, centuries later, dared to ask, did it hurt her? The high priest smiled gently. Only for a moment. Then she was with God. They did not mention the screams that had never been recorded. They did not speak of the infection, the fever, the skull that split open beneath its weight. Pain, they said, was the price of beauty. Generations passed, and the crown became relic and myth intertwined. Artists painted Isolde with gold light around her head, her eyes upturned in bliss, her lips parted as if whispering to heaven. Poets called her the Bride of Grace. Children learned to pray to her statue for humility. No one remembered the woman beneath the myth, but relics do not forget. When the age of kings gave way to revolution, the cathedral was stormed. The people tore down icons, burned banners, and pried open the tombs of saints and monarchs. Among them was the tomb of Isolde. The rebels wanted her jewels, her gold, the proof of the empire's corruption. They found the coffin sealed with iron clasps, rusted but unbroken. When they forced it open, the air that escaped made them recoil. It smelled not of death, but of rust and dust and something faintly metallic, like the scent of coins soaked in sweat. Her bones had turned black, fused in places to the crown that still encircled her skull. It was smaller than they expected, not a halo of gold, but a crude lattice of metal and stone, its spikes visible now that time had eaten away their hair. The jewels were dulled, the gold tarnished, but the iron thorns remained sharp. And between them, even after centuries, there were traces of something dark, dried, and human. The youngest of the rebels, a girl barely 16, stared at the crown in silence. "This is what they called holy," she whispered. No one answered. They left it where it lay. The revolution ended, the kingdom fell, but the crown survived. It was taken by collectors, passed through hands that treated it not as faith, but as curiosity. Eventually it found its way to a museum, displayed behind glass under soft light. The plaque beneath it reads, "The crown of Saint Isolde, symbol of piety and devotion, circa 13th century." Visitors pause, admiring its craftsmanship. They lean close, unaware that the faint, red shimmer between the jewels is not rust, but residue. They photograph it, post it, marvel at its beauty. They do not see the thin ridges of bone still clinging to the base. They call it magnificent, they call it holy, they never call it what it was. Every night, when the museum lights go out, the guards swear they hear the faintest sound from the glass case, like metal settling, or a breath too quiet to name. Perhaps it's just the air, or perhaps the crown remembers, because history does not bleed, it glitters, and the brighter it shines, the deeper it hides its wounds.